Over the past week, I've watched with increasing horror as even more college campuses have fallen to pro-Hamas groups. Some of the United States' most august institutions, Columbia, Harvard, Northwestern, have lost control of their facilities, leading, in many cases, to abrupt halts to all educational activities. There have, unfortunately, been some violent confrontations between these pro-Israel and pro-Hamas forces, and we've seen large displays of force from police departments from coast to coast. Like many of you, I've spent much of this period aghast at how this could happen. These were supposed to be the places where the brightest minds, not only from the United States, but from around the world, gathered to have spirited discussions, to engage in wondrous research, and to solve the vast problems facing humanity. These pro-Hamas protests have shattered that illusion. This week, we read Parshat Acharei, which picks up the narrative after the deaths of Aaron's sons, who had offered up unusual, or sometimes translated as alien, sacrifices to Hashem. These priests were supposed to be the most blameless of the Israelites, upholding Hashem's laws and guiding the rest of the Israelites in how to follow them. While many of the rituals were laid out in tireless detail in the Torah, we have to assume that there are many of these day-to-day interactions between the priests and the Israelites that were left to the discretion and the leeway of these priests themselves. It's clear from the punishment that Hashem gives to Nadav and Avihu that their judgment to bring before Hashem this alien fire was sorely lacking, at least in this instance. So the question we have to ask ourselves, and the question that I want us to ponder this week, is what is the purpose of punishment? On Tuesday night, many of us were likely glued to our TVs or our computer screens, maybe our phones, texting our friends and family as we watched the New York Police Department retake Hamilton Hall, a building on the campus of Columbia University that had been captured and barricaded by pro-Hamas forces. Sitting on my couch next to my wife, I could not easily put into words the emotions that I was feeling about what was happening. Certainly, among the vast array of emotions swirling around my mind was relief, as the besieged Jewish population at Columbia and Barnard could perhaps begin to regain some sense of normalcy. My feelings about the pro-Hamas people who had conquered the building were then and remain today complicated. Obviously, I believe that they strongly deserve whatever consequences, legal, academic, or otherwise, are coming their way. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes, as the saying goes. The Columbia instructor, the PhD candidate in English literature, who claimed that the university was preventing humanitarian aid from getting to them, certainly deserves every bit of mockery coming her way. But, given that the situation is unfolding across the country, in blue states and red states, in campuses sort of assumed to be more liberal and those presumed to be more conservative, I began thinking that perhaps the gravest failure in this entire situation belongs not to these students, but to the leaders who led them astray. These leaders responsible for the education of young minds had somehow gone off the path. Earlier this week, there was a student in my office when we were talking, and we brought up how my generation, the millennials, we get mocked consistently for receiving participation trophies. But what gets lost in that generalization, and yes, we did get participation trophies, by the way, is the fact that we as 6 and 7 and 8-year-olds did not go to the store and buy these participation trophies for ourselves. It was our parents and our teachers and our coaches who did that. So I wonder if in this situation, the greater blame is a system of education that we've sort of grown up in that prioritizes an oppressor-oppressed dynamic versus nuance. Once you start boiling down any extremely complicated issue into black and white, right and wrong, good and bad, imperialist aggressor versus innocent natives, you start losing a sense of how to actually talk about the issue. In very few situations do these frameworks apply. So why have we consistently allowed them to be perpetuated? In my opinion, that's a failure of leadership, much like we see this week. In drawing lessons from this week's Parsha, which, and I don't want to leave us without mentioning includes some of the most abhorrent passages in the entire Torah. I want to focus on what we do when leaders steer us in the wrong direction, when the leaders themselves are those who err. It happens. Even the Kohanim were fallible. Rabbi Charles Sherman writes that a leader's, I'm going to quote here, ethics have an impact upon the entire community and our community's moral agenda. And when these ethical norms begin to cause harm, even the best-intentioned leaders and the best-intentioned communities following these leaders must reconsider whether they're on the right path. And this is the lesson I want to present to you all from this parsha. I've spoken a number of times this semester about how we can look at the Torah through the lens of what it teaches us about leadership. Leaders must reflect a code of ethics that benefits the entire community. And when these ethics begin instead to have negative consequences, it's time for a change, either in leaders or in ethics. May this coming week be more tranquil and restorative than the last. To the seniors who are graduating today or tomorrow, enjoy every moment. You will always have a home here at UCF Hillel. Shabbat Shalom.